People say Chinese, Japanese, and Korean are very different, but I have no idea on how. Could you tell me how they differ? Don't forget to subscribe to Lang Explorer to show your support. We tend to think that these three languages in East Asia are similar and even mutually intelligible to some degree, while natives deny. All of them use characters which are not only foreign but also very complicated to us, and sometimes it's not easy to understand characteristics of each of them. While speakers of these tongues share vocabulary and even culture to some degree, they're from distinct language families and they differ substantially in writing system, pronunciation, and grammar. Today we'll compare Chinese, Japanese, and Korean so you can see how different each language is from others. First, let's have a look at the language families the three languages belong to. Standard Chinese, or Mandarin in English and
普通话
in Mandarin proper, belongs to the Sino-Tibetan language family, which includes Cantonese, Fujian, Hakka, and other Chinese languages, as well as Tibetan, Burmese, Dzongkha, the official language of Bhutan, and others spoken by various ethnic groups in China, Southeast Asian countries, and even India and Nepal. Although it isn't still clear when the Proto-Sino-Tibetan language was spoken, it might be older than the Proto-Indo-European language, which is believed to have been spoken between 4000 and 3000 BC. Thus, over time, modern Mandarin, Tibetan, Burmese, and other languages have changed into languages that aren't alike at all each other. Japanese and Korean, on the other hand, belong to two separate language families, the Japonic and Koreanic ones, respectively, and there's basically no close language abroad. Recently a new study was revealed arguing that both languages, together with other language families such as Turkic one including Turkish, Kazakh and Uzbek, and the Mongolic one including Mongolian, can be traced back to Proto-Trans-Eurasian, which is supposed to have been spoken 9,000 years ago by millet farmers in what is nowadays northeastern China, based not only on linguistics but also on archaeology and on molecular genetics. What's important is that Chinese isn't a daughter language of Proto-Trans-Eurasian anyway, even if this theory is proved to be correct. So we can guess that the common ancestor of Chinese, Japanese, and Korean might be much older, if such a proto-language exists at all. The Trans-Eurasian languages is a revived version of the concept of Altaic languages under a new name, but there isn't yet a broad consensus on the existence of this language family, at least in linguistics. So we have to consider Japanese as one of the languages in the Japonic family, which includes other dialects of Japanese, both in the mainland and in Okinawa, and Korean as one in the Koreanic one, which includes both dialects in North and South Korea Anja language, which is spoken in that island to the south of the Korean peninsula. Next, the writing system. Although Classic Chinese was originally the official writing system in all these cultures, each one went through its own history. Obviously only Chinese characters, called
汉字
in Mandarin, are used in Chinese, but there are two variants. The simplified form introduced in mainland China in 1950s, and the traditional one, which is still used in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau. While the latter two cities were returned to China in 1990s, such writing reform was never implemented there. In Japan, two phonetic alphabets, called
ひらがな
and
カタカナ
were created in the 9th century and gradually came to be used in many occasions. In modern Japanese,
ひらがな
is used for words that have no equivalent in
漢字
Japanese pronunciation for Chinese characters, or if they're too complex to be used in modern Japanese, while
カタカナ
is basically used to express foreign names, such as countries, cities, and people, as well as Western concepts that don't exist in Japanese. Simplified kanjis with fewer strokes were introduced after World War II, although they're quite often different than those used in simplified Chinese. Practically no text uses exclusively hiragana and katakana. Therefore modern Japanese is written using different sorts of characters, not only these two phonetic ones, but also Chinese ones, and occasionally Roman alphabets and Arabic numbers too. Another important feature is that, while modern Chinese and Korean are written only horizontally, vertical writing is still commonly used in newspapers and books in Japanese. In Korea, traditionally, only Chinese characters were used as well, but in 1446, King Sejong established Hangul, a phonetic alphabet, as a script for commoners who had no knowledge in Chinese. During the Joseon dynasty, which lasted up to 1910, Chinese writing was used for official purposes, and the use of Hangul was limited to texts for commoners, but a mixture of Chinese characters and Hangul was introduced during the Japanese occupation period, between 1910 and 1945, as compulsory education began, so Hangul's role was similar to that of hiragana and katakana in contemporary Japanese. However, after independence, both North and South Korea abolished the use of Chinese characters, called
한자
in Korean, and today its use is very limited in Korean, with Hangul being used exclusively for writing in general. Hangul is characterized by the fact that a character is composed of different phonemes to express a syllable, which is typically made of a consonant, a vowel, and one or two consonants. Therefore, while there are only 24 basic Hangul phonemes, or 40 if you include the compound ones, there are thousands of letters because different phonemes are put together to form a single character. The final consonant part is called pachim, which can be double. In other words, two consonants can come at the end of a syllable, and while usually only one of them is pronounced, the another one is also pronounced when followed by another word beginning with a vowel, similar to liaison in French. So let's compare these three languages by seeing how they're written and hearing how they're pronounced. Here is the example of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 1. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood.
第一条，人人生而自由，在尊严和权利上一律平等。他们富有理性和良心，并应以兄弟关系的精神相对待。
第一条、すべての人間は生まれながらにして自由であり、かつ尊厳と権利とについて平等である。人間は理性と良心とを授けられており、互いに同胞の精神を持って行動しなければならない。
제1조 모든 인간은 태어날 때부터 자유로우며 그 존엄과 권리에 있어 동등하다. 인간은 천부적으로 이성과 양심을 부여받았으며 서로 형제의 정신으로 행동하여야 한다.
You see that simplified and traditional Chinese have identical and different characters, while they use the same words. The difference in such characters makes it harder for those who aren't used to another form to understand it. In Japanese and Korean, only their respective own words and those of Chinese origin are used. In Japanese, both Chinese characters and hiragana are used, while in modern Korean only Hangul is used. Regarding the degree of mutual understanding of these characters, first of all, Chinese and Japanese speakers can't understand written Korean at all, unless they already made significant efforts to study that language to have a clear idea of how each sound corresponds to each Chinese character or each phoneme in English, as Hangul isn't used at all in their own languages. Most of contemporary Koreans aren't used to Chinese characters either. So reading Chinese and Japanese will be difficult too for them unless they have good knowledge in Chinese characters. As for the mutual understanding between Chinese and Japanese speakers is concerned, it's possible to some extent as both languages use Chinese characters. But people will find it hard to guess what some characters mean, as different forms are used in each orthography. On the other hand, traditional Chinese can be easier to be understood than other variants, due to the fact that such characters were formerly used both in mainland China and in Japan, so those familiar with old books and texts won't have much difficulty understanding traditional Chinese characters. Therefore, we can say that Chinese and Japanese speakers can communicate each other to some extent by writing, even if oral communication is impossible. And now, pronunciation. Each language has a huge variety within it, so this time we'll only deal with the standard pronunciation. However, there are some curious similarities among these three Asian languages, especially when compared to European counterparts such as English. First of all, none of them has L and R in the same way as the European ones do. Chinese is devoid of R while Japanese is devoid of L, and Korean has both, but with the restriction that L and R can only appear at the end and at the beginning of a syllable, respectively. Basically, in European languages such as English, French, and Russian, L and R can appear both at the beginning and at the end of a syllable, but this isn't allowed in any of these East Asian languages. Secondly, the V pronunciation is absent in all three languages. In European languages, other consonants such as W, F, and B turned into V, and this consonant is nowadays used quite frequently. But in the three East Asian languages, this change didn't happen, so there's no V pronunciation in any of them, replacing it with B, as Spanish speakers do. So let's see the specific features in each language. Chinese is very outstanding as it's a tonal language. Mandarin has 4 tones such as
ma, 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 ma.
And sometimes this tone is crucial in distinguishing words as both consonants and vowels can be identical. Actually, this is the case of 2 Chinese provinces, pronounced
山西
and
陕西
therefore a decision was made to alter the spelling of the second one in the romanized form, called pinyin, to add another A and therefore to enable non-Chinese to distinguish them. We should highlight 2 important features in the consonants. The first one is that Chinese has aspired and unaspired consonants, instead of voiced and unvoiced ones in English. So,
波
and
坡
sound completely differently to Chinese speakers. The second feature are retroflex consonants, which are quite difficult to be distinguished from non-retroflex ones. For instance, J, Q, and X stand for non-retroflex consonants, while ZH, CH, and SH indicate their retroflex, so their sounds are like
中上承
There's another retroflex written in R, such as
日
As for vowels, the S sound lacks in Chinese as monophthong, although it does exist as part of a diphthong. Those Chinese words written with this letter are pronounced as
嗯
Then, Japanese. While it's closer to English than Chinese in the sense that it has voiced and unvoiced consonants, instead of aspired and unaspired ones, another feature is that most Japanese syllables tend to be open ones. In other words, they end with a vowel. The only exceptions are N and the double consonants. And this language has only 5 vowels, lacks L, and has only a limited number of words beginning with R. Also, some combinations of consonant and vowel are absent, such as T, tu, D, do and C. So tour is pronounced as
ツア
coffee is,
ー、コーヒ
window is,
ー、ウィンドウ、
and dilemma is.
ジレンマ。
Last but not least, Korean. It has aspired and unaspired consonants, similar to Chinese, as well as tense consonants with more glottal tension. So the 3 sounds are distinguished in Korean:
B,
rain,
P,
blood, and
B.
beep sound. Tense consonants are very rare, but it can be found in some dialects of Irish and Scottish Gaelic. Korean is devoid of F and Z consonants, which are replaced with P and J, respectively, and also lacks words beginning with R, and such Chinese words beginning with L are pronounced with N or silent. So the same surname is pronounced
李
in Chinese and
E,
in Korean. Contemporary Korean has 7 vowels, and this number has been reduced from 10 just decades ago. What is now pronounced as
왜,
and
위,
used to be pronounced as
을
and in German, and you can see the remnants of those former sounds in the transcription of German names such as
켈른,
for
큰
and
민헨,
for.
멘신
So let's move to grammar. Chinese is an isolating language and cases are expressed by word order and adpositions, which are similar to prepositions in English. Actually, English is closer to Chinese than other European languages in this respect, as it has lost declensions and cases are shown in a similar manner as in Chinese. Its grammar is even simpler, as neither conjugation of verbs nor declension of nouns and adjectives exists. The basic word order is SVO, or subject, verb and object, the same as in English, but Chinese differs from English in that modifiers can be placed before the subject and verb. So let's see how yesterday early morning I went to Beijing Station is translated into Chinese.
我昨天早上去了北京站。
Note that words with the same color have the same meaning. We see that both English and Chinese are SVO languages, although adverbs are placed differently. On the other hand, both Japanese and Korean are agglutinative languages, and have particles similar to cases in Indo-European languages, which are added after nouns. While Indo-European languages have multiple declension patterns, Japanese and Korean lack such complexity, and basically the same particles are added. Another characteristic of both languages is that they're SOV, subject-object-verb, so sentences always end with a verb. Note that adjectives are conjugated like verbs, and what is relative pronoun in English is expressed by verbs and adjectives in attributive, preceded by modifying words, as we'll see later on with an example. In addition, the honorific system is well developed, and verbs, nouns, and pronouns often use different words to address the person they are supposed to honor. However, there are differences between Japanese and Korean in terms of honorifics. In Japanese, relative honorifics are used, and you should avoid honoring your family member or your boss when you talk to an important outsider about them. But in Korean, you need to honor them regardless of whom you're talking to now. So let's see an example. How the phrase "I got an email from the professor I got to know yesterday" is translated into Japanese and Korean, respectively.
昨日知り合った教授からメールをもらった。
어제 알게 된 교수님으로부터 메일을 받았다.
Here you see that Korean uses the honorific
님,
for the professor, while Japanese doesn't, because the very title of professor is considered to be a honorific and nothing more needs to be added. Finally, vocabulary. On one hand, Chinese tries to translate every Western concept into its own vocabulary, although proper nouns such as countries, cities, and people's name are transcribed. On the other hand, both Japanese and Korean have not only their own vocabulary, but also those derived from Chinese and others from Western languages, mainly from English. While those indigenous words have little in common, the historic influence from China made these two languages closer in terms of vocabulary. However, there are words that are common only between Japanese and Korean, and others only common between Chinese and Korean, and words that have different meanings in each of the three languages. In addition, such words tend to be pronounced quite differently in three languages. Let's see how People's Republic of China, written in 7 characters in all 3 languages, are pronounced.
中华人民共和国。
中華人民共和国。
중화인민공화국.
So let's summarize what we've learned today. 1. Chinese belongs to the Sino-Tibetan language family, which includes Tibetan, Burmese, and others, while Japanese and Korean have their own families, although there's a hypothesis that they share a common proto-language, along with Turkish and Mongolian, and many others, which used to be spoken in northeastern China 9,000 years ago. 2. Chinese has 2 writing systems, simplified Chinese in mainland China and traditional Chinese in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau, while Japanese has its own simplified characters. A fair amount of characters differ among these 3 variants of the Chinese characters. Both Japanese and Korean have their own alphabets. While Japanese uses them, called hiragana and katakana, together with Chinese characters, modern Korean uses almost exclusively their own alphabet called Hangul. 3. As for phonology, these 3 languages have the incomplete liquids and are devoid of V. Chinese has 4 tones and retroflex while lacking S sound. Chinese and Korean have aspired and unaspired consonants, while Japanese has voiced and unvoiced ones, similar to English, and Korean has tense consonants too while lacking F and Z consonants. 4. In terms of grammar, Chinese is an isolating one, indicating case by word order and adpositions, with no declension for nouns and adjectives or conjugation for verbs. While Japanese and Korean are agglutinating ones, in which particles are added after a noun to indicate case, and their SOV languages and adjectives conjugate too. Also, these two languages have honorifics. 5. In terms of vocabulary, Chinese tries to translate every Western concept into Chinese without transcribing. Both Japanese and Korean have been influenced by Chinese, while retaining their own ones, but in many cases the pronunciation is quite different among the three. Thank you for watching this video. We're looking forward to seeing you in the next one.